This week's snaggle trip is a very interesting one. Nothing is more rock and roll than huge spools of aluminum wire.
Yeah, don't be jealous. I know all the bands are going to be wanting to play in front of them
When you
next.
see this place, yeah. Our snaggle trip this week was to Ace Logistics, one of the largest commercial warehousing companies in Baltimore. We talked with Alec and Gus, the owners, about how long they've been in business and some of the crazy material that they've had to pick up and store and have delivered for customers all over the world. So here it is, our trip to Ace Logistics.
Well, we are broadcasting from our friends at Ace Logistics in Canton, Maryland.
I mean, really, we do visit the most exotic locations available.
Yes, the first podcast to broadcast from the top of a playground. And now we are surrounded by huge bales of aluminum wire.
Where's that number, Guinness? I think we should be entered.
Absolutely, and then we'll sue them. Yeah. You have forklifts. This warehouse, this company warehouses anything from flooring to plywood to giant spools of metal to canned goods to anything else you can think of. Ace has been around for years and years. We'll talk to the owners, and they'll tell us a little bit more about the history of the company, which is actually quite interesting.
It's one of the few places you could use that when you're limbering up your vocals, the aluminum linoleum song. I think we might actually have aluminum and linoleum.
I think we have both. So we were very excited about the AI DJ from Spotify.
Mine kind of was goofy at first. I think because I have my dance class list and my regular listening list, and he kept trying to sneak in hip hop, and I'm like, no, that's not my regular music.
Yeah.
So then and then he straightened up.
Mine got fired this week.
God.
Yeah. Despite having hours and hours of listening data, my Spotify DJ tried to sneak in not one but two Paul McCartney songs.
Why?
By the time the second one started, I had already gotten him a virtual cardboard box, started to box up his virtual fern and all of his virtual family pictures.
Oh, no.
And he said, "Yo, Mark, it was only 2 songs." And I said, "Sorry, I'm sending you the virtual Cobra letter this afternoon. So we're not picking up your option. We're going in another direction. How do you want me to say it to you?" So
I can just see the little bubbles of AI starting a picket line, somewhere.
And mine is at the back of it. So in other news, strange things that men do, thinking about this. You had some examples. Someone shaving in the waiting room?
Yeah, we actually one time had a patient walk in, check in, sit down in the waiting room, whip out his electric shaver, and just start shaving.
Just start clipping your toenails at the airline gate. Why not? So, anyway, I was thinking of, man, these guys, you see these dudes in the wintertime when it's like snow blowing sideways, and they must wear shorts.
Shorts guy. Shorts year round. They're never cold. Their legs are never cold.
They must show off their nasty toenails with mandals year round.
I'd almost rather have that than sandals and socks. It's so confusing to me.
That's not a good look.
It's like, are your feet hot or cold? I'm confused.
That's not a good look. So this friend of mine I work with was telling me a story. His wife, when she cleans the bathroom, she leaves like all the bottles and cleaners and stuff in there.
I tend to too.
And he decided he was going to pitch in. Mm-hmm. So he started consolidating, throwing things away, cleaning up basically, putting things in cabinets. And in the process, he did mix ammonia and bleach. So
that's a bomb.
Yes. So
that's not a virtual bomb. That's an actual bomb. Don't try this at home.
Several minutes later, he heard an interesting sizzling sound. As he picked it up, he could feel the pressure building. Threw it into the tub at just the right time. It exploded in a cloud of chemicals.
God.
But the porcelain was never cleaner after the dust settled. Now, of course, his doctor told him that from inhaling the poisonous fumes, he shouldn't fall asleep that night because he might suffocate.
It probably took 4 years off his life.
Yeah. But the men that heard the story all said, what does she want? So you cleaned up the bathroom, you decluttered, and the porcelain was never cleaner. What's the problem?
And the bird died, and the cat was cross-eyed for a week and a half.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying this is the way that most men think and process information. And now, fun with fungus.
Interesting things, fungi. They are actually, most people think they're plants because they're growing in the ground. So your mind says plant. But they actually have a lot more in common with animals than plants. Like they don't use photosynthesis. hence they're not green. They don't have chlorophyll. They grow a little differently. Actually, 50% of their DNA is the same as people,
I didn't know we were going to have math on the show.
which is kind of scary if you think about the Last of Us premise.
Yeah.
Because I don't want that close to my DNA after all that. And it gets even creepier in the fact that in some tropical climates, and there is this fungus, I forget the name of it, you can look it up, but it's like this long. The fungus actually makes zombie ants. And the ants, they basically get taken over. The fungus makes them go to a place where there's good spawning. And then eventually the poor ant dies. And the mushroom or fungus makes use of that ant by eating it.
It takes over that area too, right?
Yeah. And then spores more fungus to make more zombie ants. Now, fortunately, it can't take over people because their body temperatures are too high. But if you've seen the show and evolution, it gets a little scary.
They're at an ant funeral, and they're sharing thoughts about Steve was a family man. Steve had many positive attributes that he contributed to the colony.
And then he got all crazy and just walked off rather erratically.
Turned out he was a fun guy.
Oh, God.
I know that one actually physically hurts, I know. So, all right, so I used to work at a warehouse very much like this years ago, okay? I worked in the logistics office, right, which was a bunch of angry truck drivers and coarse women yelling cuss words at each other.
What a great combination. It's like
I worked with the truck dispatcher. I did brokerage, and the dispatcher dealt with the drivers. And we were doing food deliveries. These grocery chains were kind of frustrating to deal with. So there was a lot of anger in the office, not just from the drivers. Mm-hmm. If somebody got refused, or a driver had an attitude or got lippy, or I had trouble getting bills paid or something like that, we tended to slam the phone down. What do you mean you're not taking him? Right? So the more we slam down this office equipment, which is the name for it is telephony, which I love.
Telephony.
I love the word telephony, the hooking up of landlines. Anyway, we were very abusive to the landlines at this job. And the more you slam down the phone, the louder you had to talk into it for the person to hear you. And you had to jam it into your ear. So it would be like, it's 3136 Mercedes drive. Like we had to scream it. And everyone else in the office would be like, why are you two screaming? This is what this office was like. So one time, I remember I was coming into the office, and the dispatcher, John, had just gotten a call that somebody was getting refused, or they weren't going to reload him, or some kind of really bad news. He picked up his keyboard and went, and just smashed it. And keys.
He was keyboarding.
He was keyboarding, like Howard Helm. Yeah. Keys went everywhere. And by the time I came into the office, he was trying to put the keyboard back together, but he didn't know how because he didn't know how to type. So he's like, is this where the cue goes? It was like a puzzle, an impossible puzzle. Yeah. On top of that, in their wisdom, they put the temp agency office in the same space as us. He already got all this bedlam, right?
And you got random people coming and going?
2 guys from the warehouse would regularly come up and just start fighting, physically fighting.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had to break it up. So,
it sounds like a bar.
Yeah, it was a crazy job.
Cursing women.
It was a crazy job. And then I had 2 phones on my desk. It was everything was landlines. And to call to get a delivery appointment for these big, like Wegmans, these big food chains, you would hold it for 20, 25 minutes. And then they give you half a second. Wegmans, click. So if you got up to pee or wandered away, you had to have somebody as your, phone watcher for you,
We've done that on the phone with insurance companies. They'll do the same thing.
I believe it. And the minute that you walk away. Anyway, so there were times that I was over a partition copying something, and I would hear Wakefern Foods. And I would dive over and grab the phone and injure myself. There were injuries. It was a regular thing. Yeah, this place was like bedlam. It was crazy. So
I tell you, with cell phones these days, if you get mad at somebody, it's not as impressive to just go blink and hang up. It's just not that same feel as slamming.
We had a pile in the corner of the office of smashed up phones and broken keyboards and stuff. Yeah, it was intense.
I had these 2 girls that I worked with at another company, and they were really good friends, but they were either really best friends or fighting.
Yeah.
And the one girl got there early and took the girl's keyboard apart and rearranged all the letters. And the girl was so mad she didn't talk to her for like a week.
Right, but if you know how to type, it wouldn't matter.
She was mad.
Um, my favorite story from this era, we had this ancient sales rep that used to call on us for our trucking company, right? He was like 80 years old, apparently completely detached from reality, this guy. But, you know, he was a nice guy. He was a Jersey boy, kind of like, he was the guy Burgess Meredith plays in Rocky, kind of that, you know, it's a ting of beauty, like that kind of thing. Say, this guy would come in and, he would call and not hang up. He thought he had hung up from leaving me a message. And his phone message would be like 2 hours long. And it would be like, did you see the ass on that new secretary?
Oh, no.
And I would just let it play for the office because it was already bedlam. I'm like, oh, listen, Tom's got a new secretary. We're going to hear all about her posterior. Isn't that me too? So anyway, the best part about Tom, he would come up to see me and he would say, Mark, do you got any freight going to the Midwest? I'm talking about Iowa, Illinois, anything like that. You got it? And I would be like, yes, Tom, we actually do. We have regular shipments to Rosemont, Illinois. We have shipments to Des Moines, Iowa. And he would be like, that's beautiful, Mark, beautiful. Come on out to my trunk, my car trunk. I got something for you. He'd take me out to the car. Here, 3 bottles of wine. Have a T-shirt. I got a hat for you.
You got parting gifts?
It was like swag that had the trucking company's name on it, right? And then here's the best part, right? So he leaves the next week. I'm like, oh, loads to Illinois I got to cover. I'll call Tom's company. They were like, loads where? The Midwest?
God.
We don't even go to the Midwest. What are you talking about?
Maybe he was trying to get something going.
And then it was like the Twilight Zone. 6 weeks later, he'd come in. Mark, you got any freight to the Midwest? I think Illinois would be great. And I go, okay, I'll play the game again. I do have freight to the Midwest. That's beautiful. Come on out to my car.
Maybe he just needed to get rid of a certain amount of junk.
I think that in his mind, he was selling what they were supposed to be selling in 1975. I think that the times changed and he did not.
Oh, no.
But yeah, I'll never forget that guy. He was a character. Yeah. Okay, so we're here with Alec and Gus, the owners of Ace Logistics, and they're going to tell you about why this place is like no other.
This place is like no other
I've heard that.
because
Because
we're
we
the
own
world's
it.
greatest warehousing company.
Yeah, we are.
Is there anything that you wouldn't warehouse?
We don't do hazardous material because we're not licensed, trained, or insured.
Or interested.
We're interested. I mean, it's, yeah, you're right. I don't want to glow at night. I have enough issues already.
Yeah.
But we wanted to thank our friends at Snaggletooth for putting out such a wonderful podcast and the opportunity, and having you here as our guest is wonderful.
Let me point out that Gus had a custom decay hat made for us. Very cool. This will also be available soon. And Snaggletooth swag.
So it's just like the next Gucci, Ralph Lauren. Is that what's happening here?
Yes,
Could
definitely.
be, right. So
Very impressive.
we also have a sportswear company, and we create hats like that, shirts, coats, jackets, custom underwear if you like.
All over the world,
That could be a line.
everywhere.
It's, we do it all.
Yeah.
We do it all.
How many buildings do you guys have in Baltimore these days? I should know by now.
We have 9 buildings and 6 outside parking yards.
Are they all far apart or close together?
The furthest one is 20 miles away. Everything else is within a 2-mile radius of the port. Our business is port driven. We do imports.
So most of the things come via ocean,
Containers. Yeah, the
containers,
ocean
rail, or boat.
Exactly. We do rail and boats.
What is the most unusual product or thing that you've ever had here? Anything living or
Radioactive.
radioactive?
No, nothing that glowed. The double-decker buses were pretty cool.
They were actually from England.
Right.
Used tour buses that were brought here.
Where did they go?
I think either Washington, D.C. or New York.
Wow.
Those are the 2 markets for that product.
Maybe they're currently tour buses somewhere.
They
Yeah.
probably are.
Yeah, they are. But they came here because one of our services is bonded warehouses for customs. And until you pay your tariff, nothing comes in the country. So they had to wait here until they got their paperwork done.
Paperwork, and they had to get their engine and all the documents done for being able to drive on American roads.
And how long do you normally, is there a turnaround time, or is there ever something that just sits forever?
So usually food products turn 6 times a year, non-food products 4 times a year. That's the average. So once every 3 months, once every 6 times a year, 6 weeks. So pretty, it moves quickly.
So
Stuff doesn't sit long
your
term.
food stuff, is that mostly canned stuff? I mean, I guess you don't have
All
fresh,
dry canned.
dried canned.
Yeah, no refrigerated, no frozen.
No big freezers of meat.
No.
Not at this point.
And where do you think you guys will go? Do you think you'll stick with the same type of inventory? Are you open to other things?
Well, we have done very well through the years because we've always cultivated a variety of products. So, for example, when COVID came along, the metals slowed down, lumber stopped because construction stopped, but food went up because everybody was sitting at home eating.
Food went wild.
Were you guys warehousing toilet paper?
No, we
did not have paper.
Unfortunately, no.
You could have been selling it out the back dock.
Yeah,
had lots
we
of
had
food.
like a black market,
Yeah.
right? But we get great comfort in knowing that if a particular market drops on something or slows down, something else will pick up, and then you keep product moving, and it's worked out well for us, and that's why we've been able to survive and successfully service our clientele.
So you really have to keep your finger on the trends.
You keep your finger on the trends. The other thing is by having so many facilities close, we can always become very efficient and cost effective because we can keep juggling our manpower.
Wow.
You know, when one building's quiet, the other one's busy, you move the crews.
Now, does it matter based on what the product is, what building it's stored in? Like, do bigger things have to go in one place, or this is a pretty high ceiling?
The short answer is it doesn't really matter conceptually. For us, it matters for purposes of efficiency because if you put a lot of metals in one building, then metals require heavier duty forklifts, so you can service them better. If you put lumber in a building, lumber is longer or wider, so you have to have a building that has wider pole spans, so you don't beat the product up. So, and we have older buildings, mid-age buildings, newer buildings, but we're clean freaks, so it doesn't matter. You know, we put food in older buildings. For us, it doesn't make a difference. Everything's
And
food
in your
grade.
food buildings, you have to have inspection services and accreditations in order to store it properly.
How often do you have to get inspected?
Well, we get inspected twice a year from outside agencies, but we do weeklies and then we have quarterlies.
Wow.
And everything is documented and there's checks and balances in place. So
Well, that's great. All right, well, this has been really nice to catch up with you guys and hear all about Ace Logistics
thank you.
and Ace
Yeah.
Sportswear.
And we appreciate the visit.
We
Door's
hope you
always
like
welcome.
the scenery.
Yeah.
It's a little
Tell them
different.
all about the
Yeah.
huge schools.
Yeah,
of
do you
life.
love what we've done to the place?
This is the Snaggletooth Rock and Roll Podcast.